analyst Ryan Clark is with us. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Absolutely. And I'll start with you, Stephen A., okay? Should the Jags sit Ramsey Thursday?
Based on that tweet by primetime Deion Sanders, absolutely. And the reason why I say that is because not only is he an all-time great, I think the greatest corner that have ever played the game. Arguably, I can make an argument he's the greatest football player that ever played in the NFL and NFL history in terms of his impact. Max and I debated that weeks ago. But also the fact that, again, he's an NFL analyst. He is incredibly, incredibly close to Jalen Ramsey. They know each other well. They talk often. I happen to know this. And so in light of that tweet right there, that tells me something. It tells me what Jalen Ramsey wants. It tells me that it makes sense. And it says to me that that's probably something Jacksonville could do. Obviously, you know, at the beginning of the show, we debated whether or not the situation could be salvaged or whatever. And I took a different position. But seeing that tweet, that tells me that something is coming down the pike. Jalen Ramsey is aware of that and probably doesn't want to play Thursday night, so why play him?
I mean, I'll tell you one thing. If you see him sitting, then you know he's getting traded, right? That'll be an indication. And our original question here was going to be like about Jalen Ramsey's attitude. And I want to address that for a second, Stephen A., because I concur with your sentiment just now on the other topic. There are players who just care about winning and can be demonstrative about it and get away with it. I think like one of my favorite baseball players was Paul O'Neill for the Yankees in the late 90s, who was fiery, like throwing temper tantrums and everything, never threw a teammate under the bus or a coach or manager under the bus. And so everyone loved him because they could see that fire. To me, Jalen Ramsey don't have to change a thing. As long as he's not showing up teammates or coaches, then of course he should be mad when he loses. He's competitive. It's one of the reasons he's arguably the best player at his position, which is extremely physically demanding in the world. You don't get that. I don't care how talented you are without incredible competitive fire. So as long as he can hone it where he's not showing up people on his team, I'm all for it.
I think Jalen Ramsey, when you look at him, I've actually developed a relationship with his agent, David Mulligetta, who is an agent extraordinaire. You know, I heard you talk earlier about Drew
doing
Rosenhaus
a great job,
getting involved in some things. I think Dave is one of the young guys that you have to know, and they're not manipulating this situation. This is not a situation to where they're trying to orchestrate a way for Jalen to get out of this. This has to be the Jaguars looking at him and saying, you know what, for us, he doesn't fit. And I agree with Max. You can't get to a situation to where he's showing up a coach. But if you talk to people in that building, Doug Marrone hasn't won this team over. Doug Marrone is not a head coach that the players are backing. It is telling to me that when Doug Marrone walks over to Jalen Ramsey on the sideline, everybody gets up to escort Doug Marrone away. There's actually a guy who stands over Jalen Ramsey to protect him. That tells you what type of teammate he is, how the people in that locker room feel about him. So there's no attitude adjustment that needs to come for Jalen Ramsey to change your team, for people to rally around him and who he is and the way he plays the game. And that's the reason Miles Jack comes out and says, I hope they don't trade him. I hope he is a part of this team because the things that he does and the ways that he goes about his business are well thought out. But they know when he lines up across from the number one wide receiver of the other team that he is there for every and anything that comes with all that smoke. And that's the type of player that you want on your team.
And by the way, Ryan, let's not forget, Ryan, and keep in mind that he's been compromised by Doug Marrone because you got him in zone most of the time when he's proven to be an elite man-to-man cover guy. That's number one. And number two, in terms of the agent that you mentioned, Mulligetta, let me say this about him. I'm sorry about Drew Rosenhaus. I mentioned it. What I was trying to make the point about Drew Rosenhaus is any agent that's out there that has cachet that will get their calls returned is who the hell should be representing Colin Kaepernick. I don't want to hear about an agent that can't get a return phone call. That's all I meant by that, Ryan. That's all I meant by that. I don't know a lot of those agents.
I want to say, I was just saying that he's one of the guys now who represents Jalen Ramsey.
He is.
One thing about the Ramsey-Malone situation, Marrone situation, is Tom Coughlin. Tom Coughlin, if he backs a coach, like you're not going to back Tom Coughlin down. And when he was in his first go-round with the Jaguars, think of how successful they were. But they were an expansion team. So he could really set the culture. When he got to the Giants, it wasn't exactly that way. Mm-hmm. And he had problems on his way to winning 2 Super Bowls, but real problems. Mm-hmm. And had to compromise a little bit, but compromised with the Strahan types, with the guys who went about the conflict the right way for the leadership committee, council that they formed. But guys like Tiki Barber or Jeremy Shockey, he got rid of them. And right now, Jalen Ramsey's disposition toward the team feels to me more like Tiki's or Jeremy Shockey's than someone else.
I'm I'm glad you brought up Coughlin because I was going to come to you, Max, for that question. As a diehard Giants fan, you know what Coughlin did. And we see Coughlin, it's almost similar to Eli Manning. We see Coughlin with the 2 Super Bowl rings, just like Eli had. We sort of gave Eli a pass for long enough. We also came to the defense of Tom Coughlin because we felt like he was the scapegoat because the Giants got rid of him but kept everybody else after a miserable season. Based on what you've seen and what you've heard about him since he has arrived in Jacksonville, what are your feelings, both of you? What do y'all feel about Tom Coughlin now and what role he has played in how this culture in Jacksonville is disintegrating before our eyes?
Honestly, I see the same thing that I saw with the Giants, except less Eli Manning, which is why they brought in Nick Foles to be the Eli Manning kind of guy. What I see is this. Coughlin has certain principles he's not going to sell out. He's going to ride or die on those principles, setting that culture. A lot of times it doesn't work, and people may see a better way. But based on those principles, Jacksonville was very successful his first go-round. They got to 2 AFC championship games. The Giants won 2 Super Bowls. There will be seasons where it doesn't work and players who don't like it and don't get it, and maybe there is a better way. But the question as to whether that way does work, we have seen it work several times with Coughlin. 4 times I would count as extremely successful seasons. And so, like, he's not going to budge on those things.
All right, guys, let's shift topics a little bit. We'll stay with the Giants, though, and we'll talk about Eli Manning. He's one of 5 players ever to win multiple Super Bowl MVPs. But since his last Super Bowl win 8 seasons ago, no quarterback has lost more games, thrown more interceptions, or committed more turnovers than Manning. So, Max, is Eli a Hall of Famer?
The answer is yes. First of all, forget about his top 10 ranking, 7 and 8, in terms of yards and touchdowns, and he's neck and neck with Roethlisberger there. Forget about that for a second, because if you're average, high average, or even low average, for a long time, you'll compile those numbers. But there's value in being average, high average for a long time. Adrian Beltre is going to make the Baseball Hall of Fame. He only had a couple of, oh my God, kind of seasons, but he was excellent for a long time. So Eli has all those things. Represented the franchise Iron Man, by the way. Well, one of the all-time Iron Men in the history of the NFL. But then people are like, well, other than the 2 Super Bowls, pardon me? Other than the 2 Super Bowls? You mean when he went on the road to beat Tony Romo, to Green Bay in the NFC Championship game, to outplay Brett Favre, to go back to Lambeau, to outplay Aaron Rodgers? Oh, he had a defense. So did they. Duh, at that level, everyone has a defense. To outplay Favre and Rodgers and Lambeau, to outplay Tom Brady and Bill Belichick in 2 different Super Bowls, one of only 5 players to win 2 Super Bowl MVPs? Yeah, the Super Bowls get him into the Hall of Fame. That's right.
Listen, I'm not going to argue the fact that Eli Manning should get into the Hall of Fame. I'm also not going to argue the fact that Eli Manning will get into the Hall of Fame. I will tell you, Eli Manning wasn't a very good quarterback. I will tell you that Eli Manning is average. The record says Eli Manning is average, and you can't take Eli Manning's career and not add the 2 Super Bowl runs. You can't tell the story of the NFL throughout Eli Manning's era and not include him. But you also can't forget the rest of it. When you bring up a guy like Eli Manning, the reason a New York Giants diehard fan has to give us all these stats and has to tell us who he beat on the road is because when you watch it for the whole of his career, you're like, hey, that dude wasn't very good. When you talk to coaches and you talk to players and you ask them when you were preparing for Eli Manning, was there fear? Did you have to go into the game and make sure Eli Manning wasn't the guy with the ball at the end? No, that's not how you thought. Dan Graziano talked earlier about hearing Bill Belichick saying, you know what, make Eli throw it to Mario Manningham. Well, when you're playing Aaron Rodgers, you know what you're saying? I hope they snap it over his head. Hope they fumble the snap. I hope Ben Roethlisberger has the ball last so we can score because we don't want to see that dude. When you're playing Tom Brady, you feel the same